This is Kathryn Getsky, host of the Hope Matrix podcast. We are here to share science, stories, and strategies for how to hope. I'm the Chief Hope Officer of the Shine Hope Company, and Shine is the mnemonic for how we teach hope. So when we talk about hope, we talk about how we use stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and eliminating challenges, which are our thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. Hope is a skill. You can measure hope, you can teach hope, and you can start practicing skills to activate higher hope in your life today. And on this Hope Matrix podcast, we aim to bring in guests, experts in science, people with stories, and those that have strategies for activating hope in your life. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hope Matrix. I had taken a bit of a break, but I am back now. We have been developing so much programming around hope. It's super exciting. Have been working with some really world-renowned hope and happiness and mental health experts to develop a hopeful mindsets on the college campus. We turned the 5 keys to hope into a SHINE kind of acronym standing for stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing network, and eliminating challenges. And those first letters spell out SHINE. So that is our new way that we are kind of talking about hope and the keys to hope and what keeps us hopeful. So today I am super excited to be bringing to you from all the way over in Australia, my good friend, Matthew Jackman, whom I met in South Africa. I'm pretty sure it was South Africa at the Global Mental Health Movement Conference.
Yeah, or it might have been even before Geneva.
Yeah.
The World Health Organization.
Yeah, I can't remember which came first, but
yeah. I think it was Geneva because I went from Geneva to Johannesburg on my way home. So that would, okay. So there you go. WHO brought us together, the Mental Health Gap Forum.
Yes, amazing. So it's so great to hear from you, to have you on today and to have you sharing kind of your story, your experience, and how we talk about hope with the world and what you're doing. And at first, I just want to, if you can share a little bit more about yourself, what you're up to these days, what you've been doing in global mental health. I'd love to start there.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks for having me. I think it's so important we have space for lived or living experience leadership and how that's sort of taking place within global mental health and what that looks like in terms of the MAD movement. But yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a person with lived or living experience, and I live with bipolar disorder as defined by psychiatry. And complex post-traumatic stress disorder as well. They're not particular labels that I subscribe to. I have my own ways of understanding those experiences, but I can certainly unpack and talk through that a bit more. I guess a lot of that really was from growing up in a home with a lot of childhood trauma, and resulting in my mother passing away to mental health, unfortunately. And then really growing up being the eldest sibling of 3 and supporting my younger siblings who had a lot of mental health issues, and essentially kind of, viewing them as my babies, my children, in a single parent household, growing up in quite significant and severe poverty. We lost my mum's grandparents as a result of her death. Due to the stigma, really. They didn't want anything to do with us. And unfortunately, we were a reminder as well of their loss of their daughter. So, that I think birthed a passion, a drive, a calling. I can't explain anything else other than a calling. And I'm sure you can totally resonate because I know some of your story too. So, through that, I was a young queer person and this is going back 10, 15 years now. Things are very different for the LGBTIQ plus community as well. We still have many issues now, but back at that time, I experienced a lot of homophobia and didn't really, come out until much later. So I developed severe anxiety around that too. And, constantly having to hide myself and be someone that I wasn't. So it was, again, oppression, experiences of oppression and trauma that were no fault of my own and weren't, you know, an illness per se. It was a social illness. It was a social diagnosis, you know, through the traumas that I'd experienced in my family and community. And then that really led to me studying social work because, you know, I thought I'm an activist, you know, like this is my career. It's in my blood to be an advocate, you know, ever since I was a little kid, advocating for myself and my siblings in out-of-home care, trying to get reunified with my dad being in foster care. I just didn't know any different. So yeah, you know, passion for social justice, human rights, sociology, you know, understanding the world's issues from a causation perspective, not a symptom perspective. And then that really culminated in working in lived experience roles upon graduation. So I worked in sort of consultancy roles in modern day asylums, really, in the prison system and in forensic mental health as a kind of lived experience consultant, where I'd, you know, help to facilitate advisory groups of patients to raise issues to management and executive around how hospitals and prisons could change and be more aligned to the needs of the patients at the facilities that I was working in. And yeah, I dipped in and out of social work roles and government jobs and got very bored and tired of being a public servant or civil servant very quickly, and moved into academia, where I became a lived experience educator and researcher on and off for the past probably 3 years. So that's been my professional career. And then alongside of that, where we met, and I've probably been doing this work for, yeah, probably around that time, 3-4 years, is lived experience leadership in the global mental health space. And that's involved so many different things, like representing the Western Pacific region on the Global Mental Health Peer Network, being a young leader with the Global Shapers in the World Economic Forum, where I've had the privilege of entering spaces with yourself at, you know, the World Health Organization and the Global Mental Health Ministerial Summit. You know, these spaces where lived experience voice is erased. You know, we don't really have much of a say. It's psychiatrists and, you know, civil society organizations, CEOs, and, you know, other people that speak for us. So entering those spaces and having a voice has just been so wonderful. And yeah, now I'm a sort of, I guess, a mentor in that space, where I have a few mentees as part of the global network from Hong Kong and Brazil. And yeah, you know, continue to nourish the gospel of the MAD movement, MAD history, and our MAD knowledge with my fellow peers, my community.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you do so much. It's just amazing, and it's been so inspiring to see you and to follow your work these last few years, really, as you also try to balance out taking care of your own mental health, which is, you know, it's a juggle for all of us, for sure, doing work in this space. And it's amazing too. I've seen over the last, I mean, I've been going to the MHGAP forum for over 10 years, and it's just changed so much in terms of who they're bringing in to.
Yeah.
And that has been really inspiring to see. And I know for me, you were a big bright light there, just in speaking and sharing your story. So, and you were talking to me earlier about the MAD school or the MAD program. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked, because, you know, there's this, you know, this discipline. I guess there's a concept in research, and I'll kind of break it down for people, but, you know, epistemology is sort of how we construct and privilege certain knowledge. You know, we privilege and value biomedicine a lot more than we do, you know, Indigenous knowledge, sociology. There's sort of a hierarchy, right? And lived experience, of course, is down the bottom. MAD Studies challenges that and flips it on its head. And really brings together the MAD movement, which is made up of lots of different movements, whether anti-psychiatry, critical psychiatry, you know, consumer movements, service user movements. There's lots of different flavors, like in any movement. There's a real spectrum, and it really brings together our history, you know, of institutionalization, of, yeah, you know, the oppression of people that have been deemed mad, and brings together those people in a collective, in a movement, into sort of an academic discipline, really. Much like, you know, gender studies and queer studies, MAD studies reclaims our own lived experience knowledge that we've co-constructed through our movement, you know, which is predominantly around the importance of human rights, social justice, intersectionality, privileging lived experience perspective. And then it offers solutions for how the world could look, more peer-orientated services, more collective and community approaches rather than individualistic diagnostic processes. So it really challenges the notion of the DSM, the ICD, as really tools that don't really scientifically work or are proven, and says, that's all well and good, but we actually have different ways and solutions and options, like the power, threat, meaning framework, of viewing people's experiences from a less pathologizing lens. Because most people's distress and vulnerability isn't a biochemical brain imbalance. That's a farce. That's a historical myth. There is some biological issue in mental health, but it's a tiny slither of what we've been told by the system and by big pharmaceutical companies. Predominantly, most of our distress is located in unjust systems, oppressive systems, as I talked before from my own experience. Homophobia and how that impacted my anxiety is not an illness of myself and my brain. It's a social issue. So I use that just as a little example. But Mad Studies brings it all together and creates an academic discipline while still being a movement. So it's both within academia, but it's still a movement both in and out.
Got it. Yep. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think mental health, there's the biology and there's the behavior and there's the community. There are so many different aspects that play a role. So putting the blame on any one thing is just, I feel so archaic. It's really a system. And I find it interesting. Hopelessness is very high in the LGBTQ community, and hopelessness is the consequence of discrimination and oppression. So we know that. And hopelessness is both a feeling of despair. So you feel emotionally awful. So there's an emotional component, and then there's a motivational. So you feel helpless, like you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder to me, my framework is, how do you get from hopelessness to hope? And because we know if you don't make that transition, as an individual, we go into anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, kind of. And for me, I was frustrated because I knew that I couldn't change a lot of what was going on around me, especially as a child growing up. I didn't have a lot of control. And so I was figuring out how to use that despair to inform me of what I was passionate about and what I wanted to kind of do to change the world, I think. And it seems like you're taking some of that fuel and using that as well for yourself and to drive change forward in society.
Yeah, well, I guess to me, hope is a big part of recovery, isn't it? And for me, my recovery is transformative in that I'm turning all that has caused me shame in my life, poverty, trauma, complex grief, people that have left me and abandoned me in my own family and community. I'm mobilizing and utilizing that and flipping it on its head, and really forging a lifelong mission out of that, to feel proud, and to use story, that's hope to me. And my brother and sister are really quite, debilitated by their mental health and psychosocial diversability. So, I recognize the challenges on the ground for our community. I feel, I don't know what's happened. It's a miracle, where I've ended up, but I think a lot of it's probably to do with, a deep drive and a spirituality. I live in my mother's shoes, and that gives me hope too, living the life that she didn't get to live in reality and in my present. Is my mission,
Yeah. We talk about one of the first keys being stress skills. So identifying and kind of managing our stress response, which includes a lot of those emotions like anger and frustration and like rage at the system and sadness and grief and kind of all of that. How are you able to manage your emotions, or did you run from them a lot, or do you dive into them, or What's your...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like life, isn't it? It's dynamic and it depends on the time and the people that are around you and the situations that you're in. And my goodness, I ran away from them for 20 years. And that led me to being institutionalized for almost a year of my life on and off in psychiatric facilities. So, running away, anxiety, fear, whatever you want to call it, led to me suicidally ideating and wanting to end my life. There's only so far you can run before you need to address what's going on. And fortunately for me, I'm able to now engage not with all the emotion, because sometimes we just don't have that internal coping to deal with some of the pain and suffering and shame that we've gone through. And as I've mentioned, I've been through some shit, as we all have, but some of that I'm not ready to even address, and that could be a lifelong process for me, and I'm okay with that. But, I have the privilege of engaging with, an occupational psychotherapist, who really helps me to understand and really name emotions that come up. I think that's really important in being able to take some of the distress away from those traumatic memories in naming them and externalizing them. And I think as well, externally, just relationally, having really good, strong, deep relationships with people is always such a great protective factor in regulating, those stress responses and moods that fluctuate. And of course, a lot of my whatever you want to call it, bipolar, I just call it, fluctuating mood states, or to me, it's a gift. I can do some pretty amazing things when I'm in a euphoric state of mind, to be honest with you. And I was probably in one when I met you as well. So, hence traveling the world. So I think it's just, about having the space and support with others to help you regulate too. You're not in it alone.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone that's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder that's trying to manage? I mean, the emotions are, and that was my big, it's like I couldn't handle the emotions, just sitting. What would you say to someone? What are things that have helped you, or is it anything specific you can suggest?
No, definitely. I mean, things that have worked for me, my goal and aim in psychotherapy, my psychotherapist says, Matthew, my goal for you is to avoid psychiatry, because I accept that I need medication if I'm in a state where I can't control things anymore. As you mentioned, like I'm certainly not anti-medication. I just know that there's so many more alternatives and least restrictive options to get to before I need lithium. Or some form of mood stabilizer. And for me, that's a lot of walking, a lot of exercise to burn off all of that energy and emotion that's going on, that racing mind. I mean, even now I've been I could notice my mood elevate the last few months, and I spoke to my GP, and, she's recommended melatonin before bed, yoga and stretching exercises. And by GP, I mean my community doctor in Australia, who's sort of the primary access point for mental health services. So, she's really taken on board my views of, more holistic support, and my resistance towards mood stabilizers, healthy sleep, eating really well, and regulating in relationship with other people rather than spiraling out of control in your own mind. That's really helped me in an elevated kind of euphoric state anyway. And fortunately, I've avoided heading into that again this year, which is wonderful.
That's amazing. Good for you. Yeah, it's a daily process and practice and discipline. Yeah. What about happiness habits or things you do for joy and health and that are kind of key to keeping yourself in a positive kind of mood state?
Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, I'm such a lover of music, and music's another wonderful mood regulating exercise, particularly certain types of music too, because different music we listen to for different reasons. Sometimes it's stimulating, sometimes it's relaxing, sometimes it's spiritually awakening. So I think it's just about choosing music, and I'm a pretty upbeat person, to be honest. So I love, fun dance pop. that I can sing to. And singing is another thing that helps me regulate my mood and really exercises the body and the trauma and stress and grief that I hold so intensely, particularly when in an anxious state. And it just helps me to release. Yeah. You know, and part of that's, you know, breathing. I think breathing exercises are really important. I'm not very good at them, but I do them inadvertently through all the exercise and singing and dancing that I do. So they're kind of I'd say they're my, you know, personal medicines, in the words of Pat Deegan, that I do to sort of enable and regulate my rhythm on a daily basis. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. When we talk about the third key for hope, we talk about actions and goals and setting goals and kind of short and long-term goals. And do you set goals regularly, or how do you kind of, like, are you looking out long-term? Do you kind of look at short-term, and how do you make progress towards the things you want and then kind of overcome, you know, when things come up, those challenges?
No, it's a wonderful question, because it's so disheartening when you have, you know, a lapse in your health and well-being, and it sets you back a long time. Like, it, you know, you have your period, but then it's a whole recovery process even after that. And probably since I, you know, met you 3 years ago, I've had numerous of those where I've completely gone off the radar for like 6 months at a time, you know, whether that was through, you know, more low mood states or high mood states. So I think for me, it's I think really just important to, you know, have that vision, have that mission, have that calling, and absolutely work towards the end game, you know, whatever that might be for you. And I definitely have short, medium, long-term goals. My mind's always racing at, you know, 1 billion miles an hour. I describe my euphoric states as like being on a train on tracks, and it's like shaking and going as fast, and I'm holding on for dear life, but I'm also loving it at the same time. So for me, it's just about sometimes writing things down and having a plan. And then that, you know, that does absolutely give you hope, because you know, it gets you thinking about the future. It gets you in a future focused, solution focused mind frame. And then gives you a bit of it also reminds you though, when you're in that, you know, in a low state, you know, of what you can achieve and what you have achieved, and what's still there for you when you're back in a space to act.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an important point right there. For me, I had to change my life to where my mood state became my most important goal 24/7, you know. And when we act from that kind of lower state, and we teach the kids, like the downstairs brain, we don't take inspired action. We take actions that harm ourselves or other people or addictive stuff. And so it's really important to always first make sure that we're good, that we're practicing those kind of healthy habits and in a positive state before we act, you know, or as we're acting. And it's funny because I used to, you know, have goals and think I want to get this and this and this done in X number of years. And I've had my nonprofit now 18 years, and I've, you know, had plenty of time where I've had to take years to work on my mental health and my state. And it always is there when I'm ready to re-engage or when I need to re-engage. And it's like, we have our timeline, but there's also kind of a universal timeline that I think, you know, if we struggle with our mental health, we worry, that creates more anxiety and kind of worry, but really it all works out perfectly if we take care of ourselves first.
Absolutely. And we all have our own worldview and values about, you know, things happening for a reason, or, you know, the connecting of dots, and you know, you're an absolute global superstar and powerhouse in the space, and like to hear you have that wisdom, you know, that 20 years of lived experience on top of mine, you know, gives me hope to know that sometimes I think I get really overwhelmed. I think, oh my goodness, I've just had 9 months taken away from my life because of, you know, having had ECT last year and the recovery process it took. But then I think I have a whole lifetime ahead of me to re-engage, and all that experience in recovery is so invaluable. Like, it's all part of the work, you know. So I completely resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, part of the work and the learning and the experience, and allows you to bring even more and deeper wisdom to it. And
Absolutely.
then you'll meet one person that will change everything and like catapult you forward 5 years. So it's like,
Yes.
I think the world works like that if we really prioritize our mental health and take care of it, even as advocates and
Mm.
people that are out there trying to support those and provide solutions. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that you took the time and space and did prioritize that. I see a lot of people in mental health not prioritizing their own mental health, and
Mm. Mm.
and it's amazing that for those that do that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I guess for those of us, that are adults listening and where work is our primary occupation, often work is the site of our most distress and vulnerability. And if we don't have a balance in that, we're constantly operating in a system that will take us back into states that bring us into hopelessness. So I think it's so important that we start with whatever our primary occupation is, whether that's school, family, volunteering, work. What do we do with our predominant time during the week? And start with ensuring that system is balanced.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. The fourth key that we talk about are nourishing kind of networks. And
Mm.
I look at your system, and you had so many challenges growing up. How did you kind of create those networks or keep yourself connected to others? Were there people that were important to you? I mean, you helped
Yeah.
so many and took care of your brother and sister. And
Mm.
yeah, I wonder how you got support.
Yeah, well, it's almost socially engineered to be a caregiver, growing up with my experience. Like that's all I knew. That's what I was trained to do, was to be a caregiver and an advocate. Like I've been that since I was 3 or 4, really, where my mum had her first period of postnatal, suicidal depression. Um, but oh, goodness, yeah, I mean, I have a best friend, Sam, who I can only describe as an angel in my life, and he's my biggest supporter. He's my coach. He's my he's my lover. He's everything to me. He's like the brother. He's like another brother that I've never had, and you hear it a lot. You don't need 10 billion friends, to make you happy and hopeful. You need deep, connected relationships that keep you sustained. And Sam is just such a big part of my life. I need co-conspirators in the work that I do. I need partners and collaborators. I guess the other part of it too is community. That's why I'm so involved in the lived experience leadership community, the MAD community. I grew up a very isolated child. I never felt like I had any friends. I always felt displaced, dislocated. I didn't have any sense of identity. So for me, community is something that I really valued, hence why I really, I guess, invest so much in the international community, because it gives so much to me as a human being.
That is amazing. What can we do to be better supporters? And I think people in community for those with lived experience.
Yeah, great question. Listen. I think listen, be kind. Come to someone experiencing vulnerability and distress with compassion, with an openness, with a curiosity. We talk about a lot of these concepts in peer support and peer work. Have hope, hold hope. Sometimes that's the most important thing, is someone there to remind you of the amazing human being you are, because we are all amazing in our own way. And sometimes we need that encouragement, that validation so desperately when we are down and out. And we don't see that anymore for ourselves, where our brain, oh my goodness, those times where you feel like your brain is a prison and you can't get out of bed, you're peeing in a water bottle because you can't even leave your room, that's when you need someone there, to come with dignity and to come with hope.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think the last thing we talk about is just challenges to hope. And a lot of those revolve around thinking and our rumination and our worry and kind of all of that. What are things that you've kind of dealt with internalizing failure as a person that's, with lived experience? Do you have specific, I would think when you get in euphoria, your brain, like you said, your brain is just going, how do you ride the train? How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, that's still an evolving journey for me, I think. And I'm only just starting to harness the gift in it, because it is a gift. And I certainly don't view it as, an illness, because it's not. It's incredible sometimes. And, we live in a pretty, to use the term in that derogatory way, like we live in a pretty mad, insane world. And I think we've just responded to that. And for me, I feel my most sane sometimes in those states. I feel so clear. I can see the issues of the world and I have the most incredible ideas. So sometimes riding the train is really through, documenting that process, sharing that journey with other people. It's writing for me, or it's voice memoing on my phone when I go for those, 2-hour walks in the morning or at night, just so that I'm getting that stream of consciousness out. I think that that's such an important reflective process in our own personal growth and development, is documenting our experience and being able to, I guess, critically reflect on that and build as a human being.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think coming out of compassion and love, and like you said, it's not we think of it as a diagnosis in such a clinical and negative, and it's like, it took me so long to find the beauty in all of, I've been diagnosed with many different things, and and I'm like, what is it, what's the essence of that, and then what are the positive attributes that I can take from that I can really use to harness, because as you said, it can bring creative, so much creativity and brilliance and problem solving and solutions and kind of all of these things. But we have to first look at ourselves in a loving and compassionate way and stop, just kind of pushing all the things down with shame. And that just, creates so much unnecessary pain in this world, for sure.
Yeah, well, we start with the relationship to ourselves, don't we? But we're completely molded and shaped by our environment and our upbringing, our parents, our caregivers, our school, our employer, so, a lot of it is about, an individual focus on working with the relationship you have to yourself. But a lot of it is also about connecting with others, connecting with those social structures that maybe have, oppressed you in some form or another, and working with movements and community to liberate yourself. That's transformative recovery. And to be, non-diagnostic is not to take away the suffering and vulnerability and distress that we all experience. I certainly don't view everything that I've been through as a gift. I would happily not, have been institutionalized for the periods of time that I have. But it's just to say that there are also different ways of understanding human suffering, vulnerability, diverse experiences, however you define it, because we all have different ways of defining it, depending on our recovery. And just acknowledging and reattentioning the power away from that like illness pathologizing, medicalized way of understanding our well-being to other, social, structural, cultural, spiritual explanations. And that's all part of the MAD movement and MAD studies and what lived experience leaders can bring to this space in global mental health.
That's amazing. That's so great. Well, I'm so glad you're in this space and doing this work. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners, just about what you're passionate about or things that you're up to, or just any things we didn't cover?
Yeah, no, I'd appreciate that. Yeah, there's a little bit happening now that I've sort of become activated in the space again. I'm so excited to be connecting, with my community, particularly the MAD studies community. But yeah, I'm sort of using the platform of being awarded the National Mental Health Advocate in Australia award last year, and I'm sort of using that platform to continue building on MAD studies as the discipline of knowledge for lived experience workers. I'm really keen on lived experience workforce being trained appropriately in our discipline of knowledge, and to also have all the mental health professionals be trained to some degree of MAD history, MAD movement, MAD knowledge and skills. Much like how we have recovery-orientated practice or trauma-informed practice, I'm really big on bringing MAD-informed practice to the mental health sector. And I guess along with that, I've just restarted and I'm relaunching my own social enterprise startup, the Australian Centre for Lived Experience, TACFLI. So I'm 18 years ago.
Right.
And yeah, that's all, there will be
awesome.
different arms to that, lived experience, leadership supervision, training and consulting. But yeah, most of it will be around systemic advocacy and ensuring, at least as I start in Australia, really bringing the formalisation of that Masters of MAD Studies at Queen Margaret University and bringing that to our lived experience workforce back home in a formalized form, because of course MAD studies has been happening for centuries, but now we're actually seeing a professionalization of that knowledge. So it's really exciting to be talking about that and what that means for ableism and saneism, as well as we sort of confront the predominant discrimination of people with mental health issues. So I think that's a really exciting time in the next development of our literacy around mental health, is challenging that notion of saneism, and we'll hopefully do that through MAD studies.
Well, that's amazing. And just to clarify for our listeners, does MAD stand for anything, or is it just the general kind of umbrella? And there's against drunk driving here, so it's not that. Everyone just
yeah. No, it's a complete reclamation of the term being deemed mad, historically. Much like, queer was used as a derogatory term and has been reclaimed by the LGBTIQ+ community. Mad is a complete reclamation and liberation of our oppression as people that have kind of been, expletive by the system. So it's a really lovely, it's such a lovely space to be in. And I couldn't be more humbled, more proud to be operating in this space. And it takes a lot of will and a lot of determination, because there's certainly not paid opportunities often in this space. So through volunteering and connecting with amazing people like yourself, hopefully this startup will give me the outside activism and agitation that I need, because if I continue as a public servant or civil servant for any longer, my head might explode.
We do not want that. No. So are you launching a website, or how can people find you if they want to get involved in this?
Yeah, so you can definitely follow me on LinkedIn, Matthew Jackman. The website will be launched in a few days. So it will be, www.tacfli.org. So that's the Australian Centre for Lived Experience. But really in my vision is that it's a lived experience leadership, institute really in global mental health. Particularly around, MAD studies and what that means for our community in promoting human rights and social justice and social structural determinants, to really challenging the industrial complex around biomedicalization of human suffering.
Wow. Say that website again one more time for us.
I feel like I'm on like a talk show. www.tacfle.org.
tacfle.org.
Yep, TACFLI. Yeah.
TACFLI. Amazing. Well, it was so good to see you and connect with you, even virtually. I am excited for all of the work you're doing in the space and this new program. It's really, really amazing. So, and to see what unfolds from it. And the goal is to get the borders open so I can give you a hug soon. I would like that.
I would love that. Well, and thank you too, as I don't know if I can call you an elder or what term you might
I'll
like.
take the elder.
As an elder in our community, in our lived experience community, it's so important to have, we all need role models and champions to, have hope and inspiration for the work that we do every day. So, thank you for holding that torch of hope in the work that you do. It's just, your passion and enthusiasm is infectious, as is your yellow outfits. So, I'm really, inspired by your work, and I hope that to be that for others, one day. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And you already are that for so many people. I've seen it live. So yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all of you listeners for joining us. Please share and spread this episode and Matthew's work and message around the world. We need more like him, that is for sure. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Bye listeners.
So thank you all for listening in to the Hope Matrix podcast. We want to shine a light that hope is teachable, hope is measurable and teachable, and provide you with actionable insights for how you can start activating hope in your life today, and provide a framework so you can start talking about hope with other people and practice these skills together, because we are better with hope. Please feel free to check out theshinehopecompany.com, where we list all of our resources around how to hope. We have a lot of free programs for how to hope, including the 5-day challenge, our hope infographic with a lot of skills that showcase how to hope, and articles of how to incorporate hope into your life. We have the Hope Beat Weekly, which is a weekly newsletter that shares strategies for hope. We have a My Hope Story template, so you can write your own hope story today. Also, My Hope Hero, so we can share what our heroes are doing to activate hope in their lives. And this is especially good with youth, so they can start looking up to people that have overcome similar challenges to them and seeing how these heroes use the Shine Hope framework. We have a Hopeful Minds for Teens program, a Hopeful Minds overview, educator guides. We have a new evidence-based college course, so you can activate hope on the college campus. There are programs in the workplace, overview courses, 90-minute courses for learning the what, why, and how to hope. What I want you to know about hope is it's a skill. You've got to practice these skills to become hopeful. It's easy to fall into despair and helplessness when we deal with challenges in life, and it takes intentional work and practice to get to hope. And yet it is always possible. So no matter what life brings, keep shining hope. Thanks so much for listening in. Have an awesome day. And of course, I've got to add that this program is designed to assist you in learning about hope. It should not be used for medical advice, counseling, or other health-related services. I, Fred, the Shine Hope Company, and myself, Kathryn Getsky, do not endorse or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a medical doctor. The information provided here should not be used for the diagnosis or treatment of any medical condition, and cannot be substituted for the advice of physicians, licensed professionals, or therapists who are familiar with your specific situation. Consult a licensed medical profession or call 911 if you are in need of immediate assistance. And be sure to know the crisis hotline, 988, if you are in need of support. Thanks a bunch for listening. Take good care of yourself and keep shining hope.